So what are you doing?
Nothing.
Nothing? Why not?
Trying to get on this lifestyle radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.
Okay, am I ready? Good morning, everybody. Yes, no? Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cannabis and Coffee with me, Tamariajuana. We're having some production problems in the background, I think, today. Anyways, hope you're all having a great week. We got a blue sky out here in the East Kootenays this morning. It's a little chilly, but I mean, that's, you know, it's warmer than it was, so I'm actually not complaining for the first time ever all winter. Let's see what else has been going on this week. Again, we have a Shatterizer giveaway this morning, so hopefully you're all listening. And this morning, my guest, I don't even know how to introduce her because she is amazing. Adela Falk started POW 420 in the States. She's actively and has been actively working in the U.S. in the cannabis activism for, I would say, 20 years or more. She helps inmates. She's amazing. Welcome, Adela, this morning, and let everybody know where you're hailing out of. It's Missouri, right?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited. Yes, I'm currently in Missouri, and we are just as chilly as you are up there. I'm at a good 10 degrees today and snow on the ground. But you're right. It's absolutely sunny and beautiful, so thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks so much for being on. Like I said, trying to even pinpoint where to start with you because you've done so many amazing things down there. So I guess we'll start with what got you started to begin with? Like what brought you into this industry?
Well, first off, like most people, I was a patient, and I voted yes in 1996 for Prop 215 in California, and I got into the industry, the cannabis industry, and I had a collective, and I had a storefront, in a delivery service, and I've worked in like a legal I-502 grows in Washington, and I've worked in extraction companies, and throughout everything that I've done and going to events, I noticed that there was a common thread amongst the cannabis community that was not being addressed, and everybody is being arrested for cannabis, regardless if you're a cultivator or you're a provider or you're a mom trying to have an alternative medicine for their child. I noticed that everybody was getting arrested and that everybody was going to jail for cannabis, and nobody knew where they stood, if they were complying. What I heard a lot was, well, I thought I was complying with the law. And I just started to realize more and more that this was an issue and that people really needed to understand, not just being arrested for cannabis, but understand our judicial system, understanding when you get arrested and when you go to court, and understanding what a plea deal will do. And I saw kids going in and getting healthy from using cannabis, and then watching the grower that was providing this good grade cannabis at a cheap price to these parents. Once the grower got arrested, the kids were going back into remission. I just saw families being destroyed for being arrested for pot, and I started to see things like dry cases and ghost cases and life without the possibility of parole sentences for a plant. And it was just then that I decided to kind of break away from the industry and start sharing these stories with people so that people understood how to protect themselves, and that they're not alone in this process, you know, that a lot of people go through this, and that they're not a criminal, and to fight our system, because if they can't get a guilty verdict, then they're going to stop arresting people eventually, you know.
Right. And I mean, the laws in the states are state to state too, so a little harsher in some states than others, right?
Yeah, and totally opposite, like y'all in Canada, we're federally legal, right? So every single person uses cannabis in the United States of America is federally disobedient. Thus, we have someone's arrested for cannabis every 36 seconds in the United States. We have 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prison population. So we're definitely behind the curve. You know, we're not using a science-based approach to ending this war on drugs, as our president has declared in the past. We're using a punitive-based approach. We're definitely not going for harm reduction. We're going for punitive, putting people in prison, locking them up, and throwing away the key. You know, I tell people all the time, you're better off shooting a gun or killing somebody if you're getting arrested for pot, because at least you'll get free one day, because if it's just pot, you're probably going to serve a life sentence. I found about 60 people serving life, and 3 of them so far are Canadians.
In the States that are Canadian, I think you mentioned that when we were at Mum Cup last year, that there was 3 actual Canadians serving sentencing in the States for cannabis, which is appalling. Like, never mind that the numbers in the States, like you said, every 36 seconds somebody is being arrested for pot. And we up here, I guess we don't get the full spectrum of that, because I mean, people are arrested up here for cannabis as well, but because we have a federal medical program, for a lot of people, it's easy to get around those charges because they can get a doctor to sign their, a paper. They can then go into court. A lot of times the judge will then dismiss those charges or give them a very small, probation or something that's not life sentences. In fact, I don't believe that we have life sentencing in Canada for cannabis. 14 years, I think, is the maximum here. So that's a huge difference. But again, 14 years for a plant up here comparably to 3 years for somebody raping a child, our justice systems on both sides of the border are just broken. I don't even know how to alliterate that, how broken they really are. And with our new legalization that they're coming up with, or over-regulation, as many of us like to call it, they're doing the same thing with 14-year jail sentencing. We find that to be rather harsh, when you look at the fact that down in the States, was it Natalie DePriest and her brother? I remember that case specifically because Natalie's just gotten out recently, but they were caught. She was only caught with 12 plants, and she got a very harsh sentence. It was 12 years or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, your guys' statistics are every 9 minutes somebody's arrested for marijuana in Canada. And, Trudeau hasn't helped you guys that much. I mean, in 2015, you had about 50,000 arrests in Canada for cannabis. And then in 2010, you had 58,000 arrests for pot. But the DePriest, it's really interesting that you brought that up. So her and her brother had 12 marijuana plants, and a maintenance man at the apartment complex that they were renting went in because they had, to the end of the day, to make sure their fire extinguishers are up to par. So somebody went into their apartment illegally and saw the marijuana plants and called the cops. The drug people came, the DEA came, they raided them. They actually pulled up at the house when they were there. Natalie was just visiting her brother. She didn't live with her brother, but she was on the lease. She had co-signed for him. So she got 2 15-year sentences. They ran together, but that was 30 years, and her brother got 37 years. Here's the stickler about the DePriest. I'm kind of glad you brought it up. So she got out. She fought her case. They took an open guilty plea, meaning they didn't have anything in a plea deal in store, so they got the maximum they could get if they fought their case and lost. They pled guilty and still got the maximum they could get. She served 4 years, got out on parole, but in the meantime, she fought the appellate court and the Supreme Court, and they won. And the Supreme Court sent her case back to discovery, and she just went to court again on Friday. So she's being charged for the exact same crime that she's out on parole and served 4 years in prison for, and she's going through it all again.
Do they not have a double jeopardy down there where that would not be the case, or is it because it's a different different case?
Because they took away her guilty plea. So technically, they repealed her guilty plea and sent it back to discovery. So discovery is for the judge to look at it and see whether or not there was any evidence to charge her with a crime. It went all the way back to that. So she's on parole, but she's going through it all again. And the brother is supposed to be out in a couple of months, but we're trying to get him out this month. He had a court date, but there was an illness in the prison, so they locked down the prison. His court date's not coming up. But both of them are going to be charged again because they had a bad marijuana attorney, right? They paid the $20,000 for a pot attorney, and he screwed them. He screwed them bad, and they were able to prove it, and they got their case back to the discovery. So it's never over, right? Like, you
Yeah.
got to figure she went through 3 to 4 years of going through this trial case in the first place, 4 years in prison. Natalie is 30. She's 40. She's my age. And she
Wow.
doesn't have kids. See, I told this case really gets me because neither her and David have kids. They have another sister that's got 2 kids, but they've been in prison forever and going through this. Like, she's going to go through a time where you can't have children. How long,
Yeah.
until she can find a life and become a mom and have a family? Like, prisons took away more than that. She has a master's degree. Like, she had a job, 6 figures. Like, she was a productive member of society. David was a legal patient in the state of Colorado who moved back to Missouri and just grew 12 pot plants. And him and his sister are going through this entire. It's tyranny at best.
It is. It's an appalling story, and like you said, for somebody that's been going back and forth in the judicial system for so many years, for a plant, I could let's put it there. If this was something that was a real crime, we'd be all like, well, do the time, do the crime, kind of thing. But this is for a plant. This is for cannabis. This is something that's a healing plant. It's appalling. I can't even imagine how and how this affects you too, because you being a patient, you put all this onto yourself. My God, like, how do you do it? Like, I don't even know. How do you do this? Like, how do you keep, going forward every day?
Because it does make a difference. And I tell everybody I'm going to be the downer Debbie. When I get invited to an event, I take away the fun from it. But what's more important is I think people are listening to me, like telling people not to consent to a search. Telling people that you have the right to tell them no, that if you don't tell them no and you allow them to search your car, all the evidence that they could possibly find could be used in a court of law against you. People go, I have nothing to hide. Yeah, but you're protected by a constitution that states that need a warrant to do that. But also, you don't know who's been in your car. You don't know what's on the bottom of somebody's foot. You don't know what somebody could have dropped in your car. And you think, yeah, I've complied with the law, but meanwhile your friend had a bag and he stashed it in there because he doesn't want to go to jail when they search your car. It's just better at the very end for people to know their rights and be able to have, the knowledge to exercise them so that they can be protected at the end of it, because it works. If we know the law and we know how to protect ourselves and we have a valid defense. See, everything out here is called an affirmative defense. So if you're arrested for marijuana in a legal state, which is just a regulated state, when you're arrested and when you're raided, that's all justifiable because it's an affirmative defense, meaning that you have to show you complied with the law, and that's a jury issue. So none of your defense gets even brought up until the jury's in front of you. So therefore, your arrest and your raid and your incarceration to everything you're at before you get to jury trial is justified in a court of law.
Right. And I know in the States, too, a lot of times they'll hold you before trial, right? So you're remanded sometimes you wait for trial for up to 2 years or more, right? So you're doing dead time. And up here, I don't think they do that so much anymore. Like, our justice system is quite a bit different. I mean, if you're busted for a small possession charge, usually you're let go on your own recognizance. I've been busted for trafficking myself personally. I was let go on my own recognizance with no bail and given a court date and had to, go to court. Where in some states in the U.S., even if it was a small amount, I would have been remanded into custody and had to sit in jail until I went to trial. So our laws, I think, are a little, I couldn't say more lax, because I don't think anything is lax when it comes to cannabis. I don't think there should be any law enforcement around the plant anyways, right? That's my feeling. Even with our said legalization that we're doing up here, I sat at the roundtables in Vancouver for regulation back in December and asked Health Canada straight out, when are you going to recognize marijuana as a medicine, first of all? And any crime that's attached to this new bill is not legalization, and it's not, because legalization means no crime.
Yes.
And as soon as you're saying that there's going to be a crime attached to this bill, that's not legalization, that's regulation. And it's still criminal to possess over 30 grams in Canada after this bill goes through, to sell any cannabis out of a regulated, government-approved dispensary or storefront, or however they're going to pan that down. Now, you said you voted yes in the California way back in 1999. How is that new bill that they've just put into regulation now, January 1st, 2018, how has that changed things in California?
horribly. It's all semantics, right? So whether you have regulation for medical or you have regulation for recreational, it's all crap because everybody's still federally disobedient. If you have a dual task force with the DEA teams up with local law enforcement and raid you, you're going to be charged on a federal level. See, and you don't need any pot to be arrested. I have dry cases, ghost cases, where they've never been arrested with a weed or seed, nothing. It's simply a confidential informant stating that you may have sold them pot. You know what I mean?
So hearsay. It's all hearsay then. That's,
Yes.
like that's how we would look at it. It's hearsay. You can't just go and say somebody. So, you have to have evidence, to prove that, right? Down there, you don't have to do that, do you?
No, you don't. You don't. And a lot of times these confidential informants are paid. So their incentive to do this is higher because they're being paid. But what's funny is they're a criminal to start with. So they're taking a criminal's word over somebody who's supposedly innocent until proven guilty. But I wanted to say something. When I was out at the Karma Cup like 3 years ago, I worked with Tracy, and we were calling because I wanted to know, when I went there, I found everybody I talked to had been arrested for cannabis. But like you said, like only 10% of the charges for cannabis actually end up going into any sort of jail time in Canada. But what I did find was your guys' rights to privacy extends to inmates where they don't in the United States. Once you're in prison, you're kind of like, I could do anything. I can find you. I could get your picture. I could share anything about you. You have no recourse. But in Canada, I can't contact you guys. So, I can see that someone's been arrested for marijuana, and they're very vague. They're like, police arrest patient for medical marijuana dispensary, and that's all they say. And I can find out that this person may be in this jail, but I, by your guys' law, cannot write to that person. In other words, that person has to say, I want her to write to me, and then it's approved, and then I can. So I can't even find your guys as pot prisoners. Can't even locate them.
I know.
And you guys disappear, and they disappear for years, and all of a sudden they're back on the scene. You're like, whoa, where have you been? They're like, I've been in prison. But you don't know because there's no news on it. There's nothing, and there's no way to even find them. And that's horrendous.
Right. That's right. And we talked about that at Mum Cup last year. I think I asked you the exact question, how can we help Canadian prisoners? And you informed me about our privacy laws. And the privacy laws here too, basically make it so that they're unattainable. Because even for example, I've had friends that have been on the inside before, and for them they go in, they're remanded. When they're in remand, they can actually call out without having this TA or whatever list that they have to have. Once they're convicted and in behind and doing their actually said time, they actually have to submit a list of visitors and people that they can phone and every phone number. Now, they've changed the policy in the last 10 years that now the jails actually have to contact everybody on that calling out list to be sure that you have given permission for that inmate to be able to call you. Because there's a lot of times that inmates will put down, say, they're in there for domestic violence, for example. Their victim is their partner. The partner has a no condition order, yet that partner has actually put that person on the list, and they're phoning them, right? So because of that change, I think, in our laws, you're not able to do that either anymore. You can't just say, phone in there and say, okay, well, I want to talk to so-and-so. And before you could, 10, 15 years ago, my ex was in jail, and if I wanted to, get a message to him, I could phone the front desk at the jail in Lethbridge and say, can you, have so-and-so contact me, and they would get that message through. Now they won't even tell you if that person's in there. So that's how the laws here have actually changed in the last 15 years with our jailing system. So how would you go about even trying to contact these people? It's impossible, isn't it?
Well, you know what we do is we talked about making sure that people understand their laws and their rules, so when they fight this, they know. And having them know. See, once you penetrate the prison system, my Prohibition Times newsletter that I send to 400 pot prisoners every month goes viral. After I send it, I get 20, 30 new letters from pot prisoners that came across the newsletter in prison, because inmates will put it up on the news board. They're like, check this out. Look, you guys, there's a support system. So once the jail system knows that there's people out there for support, they start reaching out. And once we start exploiting their story in a positive aspect, like, hey, they're not criminals, they were just cannabis users, for either medicinal purpose or whatever it is, you start sharing their story, not by how the judicial system puts it out or the law enforcement puts it out, but in a positive manner, and you make these people real, then they start to see it, and you put pressure on the system to stop incarcerating people for this stuff. So it's them knowing that there's a support system for them before they even go into jail, and that's a hard thing to do.
Absolutely. So that would be we're going to go to a quick break here in a minute, but we have people that have been busted right now, per se, that are waiting trial. So that's some way that we could maybe start infiltrating Canadians. But a lot of times these people don't end up in jail either, right? So it's pretty hard to get that information into the inmates if our prisoners are just getting house arrest or probation or huge fines. Like, I mean, we have an example here with the Emery's that got, huge fines and probation for a dispensary raid, thankfully, because I mean, we don't want to see anybody go to jail, no matter what your feelings are about anybody. You still don't want to see them behind bars for cannabis, whether you are a dispensary owner, a grower, a baker, an extractor. There's just so many, it's just it should be a non-issue. Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Adela after a song. I'd like to thank my sponsors, who are 12 High Chicks Magazine, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners, MUM, the Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana, and the Haley Rose Foundation. Aviva and the Flying Penguins is our song, Cannabis Car. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
On cannabis. Don't you want a car that runs on cannabis? Don't you want a car that runs on cannabis? Don't you want a car that runs on cannabis? You got a nice life. You got a nice wife. You're working hard for your money. You got to save to survive, but the gas prices never cease to rise. Don't you want a car that runs on cannabis? Don't you want a car that runs on cannabis? Don't you want a car that runs on cannabis? Don't you want a car that runs on cannabis? All the farmers in Iraq could be taken off food, but instead they're drilling for oil. It's the government's rule, but we could easily be a hero just to make hemp production legal. Don't you want a car that runs on cannabis? Don't you want a car that runs on cannabis? Don't you want a car that runs on cannabis? Don't you want a car that runs on cannabis?
All righty. So we are back with Adela. We're talking a little over the break about, how to get in touch with some American prisoners. Now, you have a program called POW 420 that you've been running for how many years now?
A long time.
Yeah,
like 10 years at least.
So if you're Canadian, we can write to inmates in the States. They don't have a problem with Canadian inmates writing back and forth, do they?
No, not at all. You can absolutely correspond with anybody.
Absolutely. Well, that's something that some of my listeners might be interested in doing. So if you're interested in maybe hooking yourself up with a pen pal from the States that's, doing cannabis related, charges, maybe you can reach out to Adela on her website or Facebook page and she can hook you up with somebody. Now, we were talking a little bit more about how our laws differ so much between. And we were talking about how people can be just basically left sitting in the States in jail for forever. We're up here, that's not happening. So why do you find that like, especially with the cannabis, like, what do you think is the biggest thing? Is it because the government doesn't have control? Is it a money issue down there too? Why do you think they're so hard on the pot? Like, what is your feelings on that? Especially because Obama had kind of laid back federally. Now we've got Jeff Sessions that has just come out, and I'm just going off the media that we've got up here in Canada. I don't know what the difference is for reality for us, you know what I mean? But Jeff Sessions saying, no, we're going to go after this federally. New bills are being passed in California, Washington, Oregon. A lot of them are gone legally, medically, a lot of the states. So why are the feds still being so, nah about it?
Well, President Nixon declared this war on drugs, right? And with every war we have prisoners. And so in order to keep this facade that they're winning up, they continue to show arrests. Marijuana is on our Controlled Substance Act, it's a Schedule 1. According to our federal government, it has no medicinal value and it is highly addictive. There's only a couple of things on Schedule 1, but cannabis is up there. The DEA in the United States of America is 100% funded by asset forfeiture. So marijuana people, marijuana cultivators, they're the low-hanging fruit. They're nonviolent offenders. They're victimless crimes. It's a lot easier to go after somebody growing some marijuana than it is to go after a bunch of drug cartel operating a meth lab. And it's easier to keep the person who grew pot in for life, let the meth addicts go, the producers go, knowing that they're going to be habitual offenders. They're going to be back in the judicial system. It costs taxpayers in the United States of America roughly $60 a day to keep an inmate in prison, whether it's jail, it's prison, whether it's state prison or federal prison, $60 a day that Americans pay for this. Even though we have a consensus across the United States of America, over 60% of Americans think cannabis should be legalized for a variety of reasons. However, our government system isn't listening to us. So if a bureaucracy like the DEA is funded simply by arresting people and taking their assets, they have no initiative to stop arresting marijuana people. If every 36 seconds someone's arrested for pot, $60 a day just to keep someone in prison, that doesn't include them being raided, being arrested, going through the judicial system. See, we have private prisons, and God, you guys are starting to do those in Canada too, which scares the crap out of me. But we have private prisons, meaning that our prisons are like a hotel. So they get money for every single person that's in a bed. So it's their duty, it's their diligence to try to keep people incarcerated. So it's really about money, and it's really about big pharma, because pharmaceuticals are really going to lose a lot of money. So I wrote this thing, and I'm going to read it really quick because I really believe that it resonates for everything we're talking about. And no matter how many times I tell people this, I think this really hits it. See, people need to realize that the justice system is non-extinct. For the most part, it's more apt to be called the just us system. It's really set up to work against the citizens, contrary to what people have been conditioned to believe. So we're going to look at this, and we're going to acknowledge the reality here. See, the police officers that write you a ticket work for the state. The attorney that you hire is licensed by the state. The prosecutor who puts you in jail or prison works for the state. The judge that oversees the court proceedings works for the state. The jail or prison that you go to and all the employees in there work for the state. The probation and parole office that you get assigned to works for the state. All fines and fees assessed to you by the court goes to the state. See, the system is set up to benefit the state. If there were very few arrests, it would not be good for the just us system. It would not be good for the pay, the career, the pension, or retirement of the employees for the state. It's in their best interest to make work in a police state. The more arresting or jailing of citizens, the more secure their jobs are. Sadly, most people believe that the employees of the state are here to serve and protect or represent we, the people. But in reality of it is, they are not. Occasionally, just like a random winner at a casino, a citizen may get real justice in the just us system to help keep up the illusion that the system works. But in reality, it doesn't. And then I end it with a quote that I found from a man named Upton Sinclair. See, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. So the issue is not creating more bad laws, right? It's erasing the bad laws we already have and creating, whether it's recreational for Prop 215, whether it's a government-issued bill, SB 420, or now Prop 64 in the state of California. All three of those regulations still allow people to get incarcerated and go to jail for a plant. The only true solution is to remove cannabis from the Controlled Substance Act. Let businesses be regulated like every other businesses are. But whatever we do in our home and whatever we put in our body should just be that, our personal choice. And that should have absolutely no regulation. And only then, and truly then, when people stop going to jail for a plant, will we actually see the end of cannabis prohibition. But
absolutely. That's the truth, though. I couldn't iterate it. Oh, I can't even speak. I'm in tears almost, because that's just so true that we don't have, and it's the same in Canada. Everybody that's connected to our justice system is paid for by the province or the federal government. So we don't have anybody here serving and protecting us. They're here to take us and make sure that they've got a pension and to make sure that they've got a job. And that's the truth of the matter when it comes to law enforcement on all levels. Like even your defense lawyers up here, like I said, are still regulated by our provincial government. They still have to be licensed by our government. So we have our government basically ruling every aspect of our freedom that we don't have. And we feel up here that we seem to appear to be a little freer, but in reality, we're really not, especially with this new bill that we've got going through too. It's just, like I said, 30 grams is a lot for people. I've said, for the average Canadian, this isn't a bad bill, because for people that are still in their closet, all they're seeing is that they're going to get, not get arrested for a joint. They're not going to get arrested for carrying cannabis. But the repercussions of that are harsher laws for anybody that does sell to somebody under the age of 19 or 18, depending on the provinces. The driving laws, again, they can just randomly check you through whatever reason and to see if you've, consumed cannabis within the 2 hours. So our impairment laws are being tightened. But the bottom line is the only way we're going to end prohibition is to remove cannabis off the CDSA on both ends of it, across both borders, because it's still classified up here the same. Even though they're coming in with this new bill, they're not taking it off the CDSA. And that to me makes absolutely no sense. Why say you're going to regulate something, but yet still keep it as a class 1 or class 2 drug on the CDSA? So you've come to Canada a few times. You've been up here. You were at Karma Cup, you said 3 years ago, and you were at Mum Cup last year. How easy is it for you to travel across the borders?
For me, fine. I know, and I don't believe that that's for everybody, but I knew I was going to be fine because I get into prisons. So I know I'm in good standing, and I was held one time, and they just wanted to mess with me, and I'm fine. I'll go through the whole rigmarole that I have to. But I do understand that that's a challenge on both sides, and I think that's absolutely ridiculous that you should lose your ability to travel freely from your neighboring country. I think we should be working more hand in hand. You did mention DWIs and DUIs, driving under the influence of cannabis. I do believe that's going to be an upcoming issue that we're going to really, really see a lot of. And that really does scare me. But I wanted to touch base on something you said very briefly, and I think it's the biggest solution to ending cannabis prohibition that on both sides of the border that I've seen, and court support. Court support is huge. You're right. Court support will take away probable deniability. You have a group of people there that are there in support and unity for this defendant. You're right. Maybe that person doesn't go to jail, and we don't penetrate the judicial system, the prison industry complex yet. But to stop it, let the public see that, wow, look at how much support is there, and having people with signs. You do a little rally after, you do a rally at the end. And you let people know. You talk about, it doesn't quite work on your side, but jury nullification and jury immunity, and that you have the right to vote not guilty even if somebody's committed a crime because you think the crime and the law itself is unjust, and that you're protected by jury immunity and you can't be punished for your verdict. Telling people and educating people about this is one of the biggest ways, and knowing that there's support. The last thing a judge and the prosecutor wants to see is a full courtroom of people in like solidarity ribbons, a green ribbon showing that they're there for this defendant for cannabis.
We do have a group of the Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana out in Nova Scotia. They do court support out there. And we've got a couple people that have been busted recently, Darren McCormick being one of them. The RCMP, he was growing a fair amount of cannabis out in his yard for patients. He made the RSO and gave it away. They went in and they raided him here, I think it was about 7-8 months ago now. And when they go to court, the Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana mom out in Nova Scotia, they go out and they fill the courtroom and they do rally. So that's only one group in one part of our country, and Canada is huge and vast. I've attempted to try and do the same type of thing here too, but we don't have, it doesn't seem to be that people reach out here. Like I've got a clinic available here. You can get a doctor's signature in Cranbrook. I've got, availability. I've got a page where you can, we've offered court support and such. It's waiting for people to get in touch with you. I think people are still scared to reach out. I don't know why. I don't know why the stigma around cannabis is still so thick. You know what I mean? Like if you're in trouble, the first thing you'd want to do, but a lot of people, I find anyways, once they get busted, they don't want anybody to know. They don't want to reach out to anybody. They don't want to get involved. They just want to go in with their head down, take their fine, and go home. And that's what I find, like especially for small possession up here. I don't know what the difference is between the country, but like I said, when you got a big bust, and even when Mark and Jody were busted in Toronto, they had, a good show of people that came out and supported them. When I went to court, I had a girlfriend show up with me to hold my hand. I didn't have a great big show, but when I got busted, that was in Taber, Alberta. So again, small town, people are scared to come out and show their support because then their stigma might rub off, onto you. I have friends that have worked in the health industry in Alberta and BC that will not come out to a rally or anything because they're in fear of losing their jobs because that stigma is still attached to them so tightly. I think that's one of the biggest things we have to get around. And us being in the activism world and being advocates and involved, we don't feel that stigma so much anymore. But I think the average American or Canadian maybe still feel that. What do you think?
I agree. And there is a difference. Our doctors, so they only recommend cannabis. They don't prescribe it. So our recommendations are hearsay, and the only way they're legitimate in a court of law is if your doctor's willing to testify. And we have a lot of shady pot doctors in the United States that aren't doing things legitimately. They're doing Skype things. They're not really doctors. You see them for 2 minutes. You pay your $200 and you get your recommendation. And that's a problem with this system is people taking advantage of, real true cannabis prohibition and helping people end it. So that has a lot to do with it. I forgot what we were just talking about before. I just lost my train of thought. No, because it really makes me mad, this whole doctor thing, because I see doctors all the time that want to charge like $100 an hour to testify at a patient's thing after they've been raided for possession, or arrested for possession. And, here's what I want to say, though, because you're talking about why are people so worried. You don't know, nobody understands what it's like to be arrested until they're arrested. The reality of them being like, oh, my God, I might spend time in jail, or, oh, my God, I'm going to lose my job, or I might lose my house, or now my parents are going to know I smoke pot, or my kids are going to know. Freaks them out, even though they didn't wrap their head around it prior. And so, here's the thing. There's a big problem with confidential informants or rats or narking somebody out. That we'll talk crap about. But I say we need to stop that because that's one of the biggest things that the judicial system does. We need to be aware that they're going to try to turn everybody against one another. And if everybody shuts up and remains silent, we have better unity working together than apart. But they're offering such good plea deals. Okay, and you got to understand that when you're put between a rock and a hard spot, this person isn't necessarily a narc. They're just testifying on their own wrongdoing. You got 5 people, and all of them start testifying against one another because they all have a variety of reasons. This guy might have been wanting to have a baby, and then he found out during all of his arrests that his wife was pregnant. And he's like, are you kidding me? I'm looking at life or 2 years, and he signs the paper. Yeah. Is he really the problem, or is the judicial system that backed us up into the corner the problem?
Well, they do that here too, right? They'll push people into a plea agreement. They will definitely, myself for an example, it was either you're going to go to 2 years to jail for 4 grams of cannabis trafficking in the mail, or you're going to take this plea agreement and do house arrest. So I had an 8-month-old baby. Am I going to try fighting a 4-gram trafficking charge even in, here, and risk going to jail for 2 years? Or am I going to actually take that plea agreement and go home with my tail tucked between my legs, take that criminal record, and just go home to my baby? And I'm not proud to say I went home to my baby. I took that agreement. And on that note, I'm going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Adela Falk. I'd like to again thank my sponsors, who are 12 High Chicks Magazine, MUM, Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners Society, and the Haley Rose Foundation, as well as we will be announcing the winner of the Shatterizer in the next segment of my show. So if you are listening live, please go to my East Kootenay Cannabis Club page, put your number in there. I will then put everybody's name into a hat, and I will draw a name out at the end of the show for the Shatterizers. It doesn't have to be local. You can live anywhere in Canada. I'm not sure about the U.S. I'm not sure I could ship it, but it may be anywhere, and I will ship it to you. So please get your answers, your number out there. So again, thanks, Adele. We'll be right back after a break. Our song is going to be Deadbeats Inc. Drop Your Swords. We'll be right back.
This is Bubbles from the trailer park, and they're playing some fucking excellent music on lifestyleradio.ca. I hope I didn't sound too nervous there.
Please hang up and try again.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
To the pain, to the pain, to the pain.
Drop your swords. We've got the castle surrounded now. We wage war in the name of the laws and the souls you've broken. Drop your swords. We've captured the king, checkmate, motherfuckers. We won the war. The people want peace and the people have spoken. It's just a cycle how life goes. We're headed by psychos. Right, left, striking ain't my phone. These ice cold minds that design the violence. Lift your eyelids, we reside with Liesland. It's the pinnacle, this is a pivotal point. And now I'm sick of all political and biblical noise. While they're spilling all the oil that they've been killing them for. And I'm a criminal for chilling with habitual joints. Come on, what once was a hobby, officially it's what defines me. I got a rhyme, I can't deny the force that drives me. I'll be the bomb until the commas kamikaze. We're pounding on your palm trees. This is a different kind of mission, not religious hardly, but got a special bond with someone that's been looking on me. And if it's holy, then I guess this is my testimony. With every breath, I never rest until my next opponent. Drop your swords. We've got the castle surrounded now. We wage war in the name of the laws and the souls you've broken. Drop your swords. We've captured the king. Checkmate, motherfuckers. We won the war. The people want peace and the people have spoken. No justice, no peace, yet a priest in the deacon's back. war. In the name of the laws and the souls you've broken. Drop your swords. We've captured the king, checkmate, motherfuckers. We won the war. The people want peace and the people have spoken. Drop your swords. We've got the castle surrounded now. We wage war. In the name of the laws and the souls you've broken. Drop your swords. We've captured the king, checkmate, motherfuckers. We won the war. The people want peace and the people have spoken.
Drop your sword.
All right, we're back with Adela talking a little bit about, how Ralph Goodall came out last week stating that it might be a possibility that people with small possession charges in Canada might get amnesty or have them pardoned. Do you think, we were talking a little bit about the whole Jeff Sessions thing too, about how Trump is kind of like going to go hard on the federal level and then maybe end up regulating in the states eventually. Do you think that would, how they're going to go about doing that?
Well, what I wanted to say, too, is that nationwide we have a 99% conviction rate. So that means the government is 99%, like, all the way across conviction. So, like, if you take a plea deal, that's a guilty plea. So 99% of it is found guilty. So that's another reason they continue to raid, because it shows that, hey, look, people are still willing to find these people guilty. It may not have went to a jury trial issue, but definitely is. So with that being said, I believe that the federal government has full-on intention to continue to raid, because you're not legally allowed to make a profit off of marijuana. So that's how come some of the collectives, the medical marijuana collectives, were able to get away with it. But the medical marijuana says that the people are member cultivators. You can cultivate cannabis and you can give it back to the collective and get reimbursed for your time and the energy, but not the cost of the pot. Well, with recreational in some of the states like Colorado and Washington, they went for profit, even in their government, the way that it was written. And the federal government isn't happy about that. And so I do believe that Sessions and the Trump administration is going down this road, and there's going to be a lot of arrests this year, only to turn around and say, this is why we need federal regulation.
Right. Kind of like the way they're doing here. Like, let's go bust out all the, dispensaries and stuff and get, everybody a bunch of huge fines that they have to pay off. And that's more money into the government coffer, because, like, let's face it, when they say tax and regulate, they plan on, in one breath they're saying, oh, we don't want to make a bunch of money off cannabis. But yeah, they're adding $1 tax to it up here, right? So it's almost like a hypocrisy. Don't want to make any money, yet we're making money. And I understand the whole, put it towards healthcare and do this and all the taxation, arguments for it. But when it all boils down to it, it's a plant that somebody can grow in their front yard that shouldn't have to belong to anybody. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think you get that, where, it's like a weed. It was growing, readily all over everywhere for thousands of years before we got our hands onto it to begin with. So that being said, with our regulations coming up, like we talked about a little bit too over the break, that, it's still not through Senate yet. It could be stopped dead in its tracks and never get anywhere. But now, like, we're thinking about getting there, and our government's talking about pardoning, small amounts. Do you think you guys are ever going to get there? Are they doing that, or talking about that in any of the states where they would give amnesty, or would that be a whole great big upheaval in your justice system?
There's been, and Prop 64 was actually retroactive. So if you had any of those small possession crimes, you could, I actually have that paperwork available. You can actually fill out this 2-page paperwork and submit it. And it's actually so much more than you think, because if you got, like, say, arrested on a state level and then the state found you not guilty and then the feds picked you up, or whatever, you have 2 marijuana charges on a state level and then you get raided again for the feds pick you up, they will consider you a habitual offender using your prior state ones. Well, what if you get your prior state ones removed? Does the federal government then re-sentence you because you only did life? Because, like Jeff Nazansky, he got life because he'd been arrested 2 other times for pot. They called him a habitual offender and gave him life without the possibility of parole. So, like, it's really interesting to see. But, like, you're right, how hard is it to put in the passing or writing an initiative of any sort or any bill saying within 30 days of passing this that anybody who's been arrested for, cannabis-only offenses has their record expunged and or is being released from prison. Especially that also also applies to, like, if you're passing a law that is ailment specific, like only people with cancer or blah, 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 to also put and or any other ailment to which cannabis causes relief, so that you're not leaving people out who, diseases and stuff are constantly being found. You don't want to leave something out because the person who had this sickness wasn't able to go and petition and lobby to the extent that you were, so their ailment wasn't put on there. Those are horrible laws and stuff. Did you know that, so you were talking about marijuana rates, did you know that in America 90%, we have a marijuana eradication program through the DEA, that 90% of the marijuana eradicated is feral hemp?
Yeah, no, I didn't know that, but I believe that. And feral hemp, which means it was found outside growing randomly, right? Which is feral, so it could belong to nobody, and they're destroying it, for what purpose, and who's paying for that too? Like, you have to wonder, with all the steps they take, who's paying for that? Of course, it's the tax dollar, right, coming out of the person that's working or owns property or whatever. You really have to hit to the taxpayer and say, like, are you guys prepared or aware of the fact of how much of your tax dollar is going to this ridiculousness? And I think that's where we've been at too up here is, talking to people about their tax dollars, about the fact that your tax dollar is being spent by putting somebody, away in a jail for, even if it's 60 days up here for a pot offense is ridiculous. And I like I said, I don't know if we've got a little less stigma up here when it comes to cannabis, because we're not state to state regulated. Like we have a federal program, right? And because it is being regulated through the federal and then kicking back to the province on distribution, it's quite a bit different model. Even though they kept saying we're going to go after the Colorado model, it's not the same as any of the models in the States that they're picking up on up here, as far as I can tell. So I don't know, like, I guess we're going to have to wait till the end of, June or middle of June. I want to let everybody else know out there while we're touching on this too. There is that proposal that's able to be put into Health Canada, everybody, till the 20th of January. Now, everybody can go in and answer those questions. You don't have to have been at them. You don't have to be a part of any group. As a citizen to citizen, it's at cannabis@canada.ca, and there is a proposal that every patient can go in, or every person in Canada. It's for just asking questions about what are regulations and how the program is going to end up looking like. So please, if you have time before the 20th of January, to go to cannabis@canada.ca and fill out that proposal, because that's something that if you want to have a say in what's going to happen in July, do it. And it's just as easy as sitting behind your keyboard, like many of you do anyway. So let's get to do that as well, because it's important that we all get our say and what the government's going to do. Like, I've been blithering on about corporate takeover because that's how it's looking up here. I like I said, I'm not really sure how this is all going to pan down. I've got my opinion on it, and I think that I make that pretty clear everywhere I go, that I'm not a licensed producer person. I wish that everybody would grow their own. And, again, we're going to have a little better access maybe with this recreational legislation that's coming in, that people will be able to get better access, but at what cost? And what are the costs going to be with taxation added to it? So, that's one way of looking at it. Are you going to be up in Vancouver in February again?
I'm thinking I am. That's what Dennis was telling me. So it sounds like that's going to be happening. And I am making a bunch of pot prisoner posters for Canadians. I'm doing all 3 of them again. And all the information will be up, and we will be writing or getting letters to send to them so that they know that their Canadian peoples are supporting them. So
absolutely. Can you make sure that everybody, so that we know who these Canadians are, and that we can maybe get some people in touch with them, because that's something I'd be interested in doing myself, is reaching out to some prisoners in the States through our groups and trying to get, let them know that we are here, that they're not alone out there. And for Canadian prisoners too, if anybody does know of anybody that is sitting in jail in Canada for cannabis that would be willing or wanting to have some support, if you know of anybody, please get them in touch with Adela or myself even, or Debbie Schultz-Giffen out at Maritime Reserve for Medical Marijuana, because they do the court support out there. And let's hope that we don't have the ones that are facing trial right now, because we do have a few that are going to trial. We got the Niagara Cannabis Club. They're looking at charges right now too still. Darren McCormick is still looking at charges out at the East Coast. I've got Matthew Wiley in Airdrie, or not in Airdrie, he's in Stony Plain, Alberta. He's looking at charges right now for 40 gram a day grow, who is a licensed patient that again, Health Canada drug their feet on their paperwork, and he was busted before his paperwork came back from Health Canada. He's a father of 2 children, so we've got them up in Stony Plain. We also have Sean Howell in Airdrie, Alberta, that was also looking at going to trial here again. I'm able to say these names publicly because they've reached out to me and I know them, and I've asked permission to actually let everybody know that these people are actually out there. So just so you know, there are 4 people that we know of right now that are waiting trial. And like I said, the Niagara Cannabis Club is more than 1 person. That's, I think, 4. So we've got people out there up here as well. Okay, so we're in the last 5 minutes, Adela, of my show. We're going to look at this page for a number for the Shatterizer giveaway. I wish I could send you one of the states. Actually, you know what I think I'll do is I'll make sure that if you're going to be in Vancouver in February, I'll bring you one. If I'm going to be there, or I'll make sure that there's one at Asia's for you when you get there. So you can try one out too. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So again, will you give a shout out to your pages and how to get in touch with you before I do the straw?
Yeah, absolutely. And, maybe we could get together and work on, I had an attorney out there that was willing to do some paperwork on maybe getting these guys sent back to Canada, and they would be resentenced because, like you said, you don't have life sentences for them. They all said they'd be willing to go home as long as, what's their other option is being in prison. So if I could help work with you guys on spreading that information, that would be awesome. But, yeah, POW420.com, it's a nationwide database. You just simply click on a state, find an inmate that you like, and write to them and show them some love and support. There's nothing like getting a letter in prison when you're just sitting in prison, from a stranger, knowing that people are supporting you and that are thinking about you. So.
Absolutely. Actually, you can get Shatterizers in the States. I just was reminded of that. They distribute out of Colorado. So I can probably ship you one down there. So I probably will just do that instead. Yeah. I forgot that they started in the States, actually. So that's a good thing to know. Thanks, Al, for putting that out there for me. So if you're in the States, you can get your hands on a Shatterizer too. Okay, so I've got quite a few people that have actually are listening this morning and have put their numbers out there. I will tell you what the number that I chose for today's number, and nobody's gotten it. But that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the closest one to the number that I chose. So the number that I chose was 2420. So 2420. And the closest one that I look like I'm seeing right now would be Melissa Young at 2018. And she happens to be also another local cranny girl. So that saves me on shipping. So it looks like, Melissa, you won the Shatterizer, my dear. So congratulations to Melissa. I will get that to you as well. And again, I'd like to thank you, Adela, for coming on my show because, like I said, there's so much work that you do down in the States. I know you travel to Hempfest and talk and do all kinds of public speaking, and the time that you put in. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you do to bring us, keep us aware of what's going on your side of the border. And again, I hope to see you in February at the Mum Cup, because the Mum Cup, again, everybody, is the 23rd, 24th, and 25th of February out in Vancouver. You can get a hold of May Moon and get your tickets through 12highchicks.com. So if anybody's interested in heading out there, Adela will be there. And Dennis Bossert, why do I always have a heck of a time saying his name? Dennis will also be there. I met Dennis last year as well. He's been out in Vancouver, and he's been bouncing around. He was in Jamaica. I'm not sure where he is right now, but he's also helps Adela do a lot of work out down in the States as well, and he's very knowledgeable. But if you guys want to talk to or get in touch with prisoners, get a hold of Adela. And yes, I'd like to start doing some court support and some more stuff for Canadians up here too. So that's something that I think everybody should be interested in, because it could be you. Like, just because we're getting, regulation up here doesn't mean that the laws are changing that much, because they aren't. There's still laws and, criminal offenses attached to cannabis, even with this new regulations coming out. So it could be any one of us. I didn't think it would ever be me either. I didn't have my first drug charge till I was 35 years old. And it was for 6 grams of pot. So, you know what I mean? Like, it can happen to anybody at any time, and it could be you. So keep that in mind until our laws change. And actually, cannabis is removed off the CDSA. We're not really free.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks again, hun, for coming on. You want to give a shout out for your website again, just as we're going to close off here?
Yeah, POW420.com, and right, no one belongs in jail for a plant.
Absolutely. Nobody belongs in jail for a plant. Thanks very much, everybody. Y'all have a good week. Next week, I am going to have Lisa Kirkman on my show. She hasn't been heard from for a while, so we're going to have Lisa on, have to hear what she's got to say about what's been going on with her, the Calgary Cannabis Club, and all kinds of stuff going on in Alberta. So you guys have a great week, and thanks to my producer, Al Rapp, my sponsors who are 12 High Chicks Magazine, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partner Society, MUM, the Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana, and the Haley Rose Foundation. Y'all have a good week. Talk to you next week.
So what are you doing?
Nothing.
Nothing? Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.